Renée Vivien, I love you because you are going to die. Renée Vivien was an English-born French symbolist poet who was part of the Belle Epoch gay community of 1890s Paris, the pure and the impure, as Colette describes them in her book of the same name. Vivien, born Pauline Mary Tarn in 1877, was the only child of John Tarn and Mary Gillette Bennet. Her father was a wealthy Englishman who had inherited a comfortable merchant fortune, while her mother was an American beauty from Michigan. When Pauline was only 6 years old and studying at school in Paris, her father suddenly died, naming his daughter as his sole heir. This infuriated her mother, who wanted her husband's fortune for herself, and she tried desperately to have Pauline pronounced insane so that she could claim the fortune. We don't know what effect this had on the sensitive child, but it resulted in Vivien being taken away from her mother to live as a ward of court until she came of age to claim the inheritance. While in Paris, she met her first love, Violet Shillitoe, a precociously intellectual young American girl from Cincinnati. As she put it in her own words, "Around the age of 13, I took a very pure passion for a companion whose beautiful, melancholy eyebrows I loved. Ignorance kept our two mouths ingenuous away from each other." Violet and her sister Mary were neighbours of the young Paulines, and both girls cultivated a hatred of men. Violet in particular outshone her sister, being something of a prodigy, teaching herself ancient Greek and Italian in order to read Plato and Dante in the original languages. Tarn's love for Violet, though unconsummated, would have a profound and lasting effect on the young woman. At age 16, Violet would meet another wealthy American heiress called Mabel Dodge and begin an affair with her, choosing her over Pauline. This was the beginning of many such disappointments for the young Renée Vivien. When she came of age, Tarn took the pen name Renée Vivien, meaning born again, seeking to start her life over in Paris and escape the hold of her mother. She, who was naturally shy, asked her friends, the Shillitoes, to introduce her to another friend of theirs that they had been neighbours with back in America, and another young American woman who was making quite a name for herself in Paris. Her name was Natalie Barney, and though Vivien couldn't know it, this meeting would in many ways taint the rest of her life. Natalie Clifford Barney was born into a wealthy American family in Cincinnati in 1876. Her mother, Alice Pike Barney, was a skilled painter and student of Whistler. Her father inherited a railroad car manufacturing fortune. According to Barney, when she was 5 years old, she met Oscar Wilde in a New York hotel as she was running away from a group of boys. Wilde picked her up and held her out of their reach. He then sat her on his knee and told her a story. During this time, Wilde also met Natalie's mother and successfully persuaded her to pursue her talent for painting, despite her husband's disapproval. Natalie claims to have known that she was a lesbian from the age of 12. The Shillitoes arranged the meeting, and Vivien met Natalie in 1899. They met in a box at the opera, and Renée was immediately smitten with the beautiful and talented Natalie. The feeling this time was mutual, as Barney was enchanted by the mysterious and troubled poet, who she described as being haunted by death. What Vivien didn't know, however, was that she would become one in a harem of lovers which Natalie kept to satisfy her sexual whims. At the time of her meeting with Renée, Natalie was still in a relationship with her first sexual partner, who she met at 17, her friend Eva Palmer, who would later become famous for her marriage to the poet Angelos Sikelianos and her advocacy of ancient Greek culture, reviving the Delphic festivals. Their relationship remained consistent until Palmer's marriage in 1907, which Natalie couldn't forgive her for. Barney even used Palmer for advice on how to win other women, including Renée Vivien. During this time, she was also in a tumultuous relationship with the famous French courtesan Léon de Pougy, who she presented herself to dressed as a page of love sent by Sappho. The passionate but short-lived affair would end in arguments, as Natalie was convinced she could rescue de Pougy from her life as a prostitute. But Liane, who was enjoying life as one of the most sought-after women in France, had no desire to be rescued. During her relationship with Renée, she also began an affair with Olive Custance, an English poet who was at the time courting Lord Alfred Douglas, famous lover of Oscar Wilde, and the man she would later go on to marry and have a child with. Barney invited Olive to the home she shared with Vivien, and the three briefly engaged in a ménage à trois. Natalie said of monogamy, "One is unfaithful to those one loves, in order that their charm does not become mere habit," although she herself was not immune from jealousy. Natalie, who also wrote poetry, did have a positive effect on Vivien's poetry. The pair were symbolist poets, and Barney became Vivien's muse as they delved deeper into their love of ancient Greece and famous historical women. Barney would ultimately inspire much of Vivien's greatest work. But Natalie's infidelity would take a toll on Vivien. In April 1901, Renée received a telegram from Cannes that her first love, Violet Shillito, was dying of typhoid fever. Renée immediately left to be with Violet on her deathbed. The following day, another telegram arrived announcing her death. She was 23 years old. Vivien blamed herself for Violet's death, and the symbol of violet flowers for lesbian love would become a strong theme in her poetry and something of an obsession for her. That same year, Natalie's former lover, Léon de Pougy, would publish a roman à clef detailing the relationship between them. Everyone would recognize Natalie as the lover, and it proved quite an embarrassment for her and Vivien. When Natalie went back to America to visit her family, Renée abruptly stopped answering her letters. Natalie would try for years to win Renée back, including hiring an opera singer to sing under her window and throwing notes over her garden wall. All were intercepted, however, by Vivien's governess. It is possible that Renée blamed Natalie and the sexual debauchery Natalie brought out in her for the death of Violet, the pure, chaste love dying because she had dared to indulge in the impure, carnal love of Barney. Vivien was deeply conflicted. She had cast off her chastity and been punished for it. Another threat also loomed for her. Natalie had sexually liberated her, cut through her self-imposed boundaries, meaning that the self-destructive and violent side of her character could now fully indulge itself, fueled by passion. We can see this in the opening stanza of her poem, Victory. And yet she had this criticism of Natalie and the hedonism she saw within her. Nothing lives within you, not one tender dream. Your dark, soulless eyes extinguish all you see, as though a silent home, an ashy fireside, and time grows tedious as a rosary. Natalie clearly had come to symbolize the hedonism which Vivien so hated but couldn't escape from, a conflict which would ultimately consume her. Renée had moved on now, dating the Baroness Helen van Zuylen, one of the Rothschild family. It was in this relationship with the Baroness, who was 14 years her senior and already married, that provided Vivien with the emotional stability she needed. In her letters she writes that she considered herself married to the Baroness. The relationship was also beneficial for the Baroness, as the pair began co-writing poetry, although many critics believe that the supposedly co-authored works were written solely by Renée Vivien, and that works published only under Baroness van Zuylen's name were in fact also Vivien's work. However, this relationship was still not a monogamous one, as Renée had always desired, as both women were unfaithful. In 1904, Natalie Barney wrote Je me souviens, I remember, a prose poem devoted to the relationship she shared with Renée Vivien. This succeeded where all else had failed, and the two reconciled, travelling to Lesbos together. This happy period wasn't to last long, however, as Renée received a letter from her lover, the Baroness, and travelled to see her in Constantinople. Natalie thought to break up with her. However, Vivien chose the Baroness, and was never to return to Natalie again. Renée would then have an affair with the wife of a Turkish diplomat, though she chose to stay with the Baroness, and eventually, in 1907, Zuylen left her for another woman. Humiliated, Renée's physical and mental health took a turn for the worse. Already addicted to the popular sedative chloral hydrate, to the extent that it allegedly made her body often unresponsive during lovemaking. Her friend and neighbour, the famous writer Colette, also noted how Vivien was addicted to alcohol and ate very little food. This has led many to speculate that she was suffering from anorexia as well as depression. Colette paints a vivid and disconcerting picture of Renée Vivien during this period of her life, in her book titled The Pure and the Impure, where she states that Renée was holed up in a dark, heavily incensed house, often fainting from hunger, surviving off spoonfuls of rice and trying to conceal her alcohol addiction. As Colette put it, Renée was dying. When I was told how she had managed, in a weirdly simple way, to drink to excess without anyone in Paris or anyone in Nice, in the little house in the Paris-Sessol, ever being able to catch her at it. In a strange twist, Colette also noted how Renée was being hounded during this time by her elusive lover, who she referred to as her master. At dinner parties she was often summoned away, and gifts would arrive for her. She once confessed to Colette that she was afraid this lover would kill her, saying, "I don't know, but I'm in danger. S will kill me, or else she will take me to the other side of the world, to countries where I shall be at her mercy. She will kill me." Many believe she was referring to the Baroness, but it is possible that in her afflicted state of mind she had made all this up, as Colette believed. In 1908, after visiting London, Vivien attempted to take her own life by taking an excess of laudanum. She lay down on a divan with a bouquet of violets in her hands. This attempt ultimately failed, though she contracted pleurisy and became incredibly weak, returning to Paris in 1909. She now walked with a cane and refused to eat. She died on the 18th of November 1909 at the age of 32. The official cause of death was listed as lung congestion, although it is now thought she died of pneumonia due to complications from drug and alcohol abuse, as well as malnutrition. Natalie Barney visited Vivien's house with a bunch of flowers, unaware of the news. She found the Baroness on the doorstep, who informed her of Renée's death. Natalie left the house and walked for a block before fainting on a park bench, overcome with grief. Though 6 months later she would begin another of her more serious relationships with the writer Elisabeth de Gramont. Barney said of Vivien years after her death that she could not be saved. Her life was a long everything turned to dust and ashes in her hands. This seems quite cold and dismissive for one of the great loves of her life, although she did sustain the Renée Vivien Writers' Award that was set up by the Baroness Zuylen after Vivien's death. It has undoubted how Vivien was taken advantage of during her lifetime, however. From missing jewellery to broken trusts and stolen work, it is difficult to imagine how so many who claimed to care for her let her slip between their fingers.